Thank you. Yeah, so hi everyone, I'm JK. I think quite a few faces are familiar, but it's also nice to have new faces as well. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about learning from nature for life and business today as well. And my company, my organisation is called Where the Mind Grows. So am I on the right one? Let me tell you a little bit about me before I dive into things. So I'm definitely an amateur being the main word there, adventurer. I'm I would say that my love for my dog sometimes outweighs my husband. And you are right there that yes, that's Ivan the eagle owl who gave me away at my wedding. So nature is very much a part of who I am, as well as my business. So my core business is Where the Mind Grows. I've been trading under that name since 2019, and before that I was trading under the name JK Changework as well. And kind of I just saw and felt some real tensions of like doing the indoor stuff and the online stuff, and knew that nature needed to be part of the way that I did business. From that, I've evolved into a collaboration with another ORB member called Sarah Spencer, and we've created Think Like a Forest, which is a regenerative business program for small to medium businesses, coaches and consultants who kind of want to learn how to create a business that looks regenerative, not just sustainable as well. So to tell you a little bit about why and how I've got to where I am, I guess it's important for me to kind of say that I've become fascinated by our stories of separation from the natural world. And part of that is through my own occurrence. I've had many separations throughout my life. I grew up in the countryside. I was in an era where it felt safe enough for us to be out in the wild for most of the day. And so nature was really compounded as part of my identity as a younger person. But as I grew up through kind of life and professionalism, there was definitely moments within that where I separated from nature. My background kind of working in mental health and employability services. I worked in psychiatric hospitals and then went on to community mental health beyond that as well. So doing a load of good stuff, but not really getting myself connected with nature. But that all, that all kind of compounded really that feeling that I was recognizing these burnout and overstretched systems. So working and managing teams in my past sectors, and now working with individuals and teams within nature, within the woods as well. What I really was recognizing is this kind of symbiotic relationship between our overstretched and overstressed systems. And I love this Gandhi quote. I mean, you can always rely on Gandhi for a good quote, can't you? But what we are doing to the forests of the world is but a mirror of reflection on what we're doing to ourselves and one another. So I was really interested in this kind of interconnection between why we're so busy, why all our systems are so overwhelmed, and how that's causing kind of these mental health impacts on our life. And then obviously how that's mirrored in the way that nature and biodiversity are suffering as well. So could I do stuff through the lens of coaching and well-being that would also cultivate people's impact, their reconnection with the natural world? So as I said before, there was a multiple different occasions throughout my life where that separation was occurring, but the one where I actually listened was a day when I should have been in about 3 places at once, and that's no exaggeration. I was waiting for my line manager to call me back because my actual line manager was off sick with stress. And I was driving along from one meeting to another. And when I heard my phone ring, I pulled over because I saw it was the manager I'd been wanting to talk to, expecting to get some amazing kind of supervision on some guidance of stuff. And what I got at the end of the phone was another leader in crisis. So I kind of took a pause, realized I couldn't have the conversation at the time, and kind of just listened to him. And as I was doing that, I was sat looking at the festering, beautiful lunch I'd made a few days before that was sat on my passenger seat. And there was loads of kind of sandwich packages from garages strewn in the bottom of my car. And I kind of had this feeling inside me of like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? So once I put the phone down before I kind of drove off again, I got this kind of like pull from outside, and I looked to the right of myself, and there was not this exact scene, but one very similar to this. And I got out the car and I went back to the woods, and everything kind of clicked from there, that actually nature was going to be something that could be really important to me and help me and others in order for us to design our life and business in a way that can help the world rather than contribute to its problems. So that's what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about today. So just to give you a little bit of a pre-frame of how I encourage people to kind of see nature as a teacher and something we can learn from. As Jill said, it's not just about being in it, but being part of it as well. And at Where the Mind Grows, the way that we kind of do that is navigating the inner and outer self. And I do that through different forms of coaching and facilitation, working with teams, seeing the connection as a team and a self with an organization, and those wider ripples like community, and the natural ecosystem that we're part of, and our sense of place and belonging in which we run our businesses or function as businesses or business owners, and also as ourself and our identity there as well. So I've had a real awakening. I was like, nature surrounds us, you know, it's not outside. We take ourselves outside of it. We're the ones who have built the walls and containers in which we kind of keep ourselves now. And I realized that actually the work to be done and the work we can all kind of do and contribute for ourselves is that relearning what it means for us to be nature. And this kind of gets banded around a lot within regenerative and sustainable spaces around learning, you know, that we are nature, but what does that kind of actually mean for us, and how do we embody that beyond the just kind of going out and extracting from it to help ourselves feel good. So for anyone that is interested, this is Where the Mind Grows HQ between March and November, December each year, where I go and work in a woods. I'll save my story about how I blagged a pretty wonderful piece of land from a landowner, which I now lease as part of my working environment as well. But yeah, you can see there it's surrounded by beautiful birch trees. There's a wonderful oak tree there, and last year I got the burrow, I call it, my tent in the woods, where we go and work from. But when I'm not at the HQ, I'm coaching in places like this, wonderful wild places, and kind of helping people to be at place with their natural world as well. And that would be one of my lessons for today, really, is just to encourage you to be curious about the place in which you belong as part of nature. One of my big lessons in my kind of business approach has been to see nature as a co-facilitator. And I couldn't really ignore this, because when people were coming alongside me into the natural spaces that I coach, run events and team days, I was seeing that this amazing shift was happening. Now, I'm sure most of you know that nature is good for us, and that we have this natural bodily response that's called attention restoration theory. And 20 minutes alone out in nature will help us to reduce our cortisol levels in our high stress, high pressured, high busy lives. But it also helps us to ignite the things that are really important for us to be able to change and lead in our world. So it's helping us to shift into mindsets of creativity, curiosity and problem solving, to be resourceful and imaginative in the way that we might explore issues or challenges or find resolve. So I always joke that nature helps me be a lazier coach, because a lot of what I do is really just kind of sitting back and supporting people to interact with the environment, to reap the benefits of that shift internally for themselves, and to be able to have new resources possible for them that perhaps the busy everyday world was stifling for them because of the levels of complexity that we see in the world and our businesses today. So you can see some examples there of just kind of people interacting and being part of the natural world and receiving those shifts for themselves as well. So just a pause and inward introspection, really, and yes, both these pictures are me. Just to kind of think for yourself, maybe be curious and open to the question that I've put here is, what's the first lesson that nature taught you? And of course, if you feel comfortable to share it in the chat, then please do so. But maybe just to take that curiosity for yourself. Now, of course, this could be something like teaching you a hardy lesson, like the first time you were stung by a wasp, or maybe if you splashed in a puddle that was too deep for you. But it might also be a lesson around adventure or freedom or curiosity that I've mentioned before. So it's just reminding yourself to kind of go back in time to maybe that first lesson that you record for yourself. And I sense that there's a real experience for people when they're shifting themselves back to being connected with and learning from nature, is this remembering, you know, if we were in a position where we had time in the natural world when we were young, or maybe in just a pinnacle point of our lives, that actually it's this remembering that moment that's there. And of course, evolutionary, we are nature, that's a biological part of who we are. And therefore our body kind of has this evolutionary remembering within it as well. It's able to interact and find kind of awe, beauty, recognize danger, all of those different things that the natural world has within it. So I'm going to just cover 5 lessons from nature today for life and business. Of course, there are multiple lessons that can be learned, but I'm going to cover the ones that have really kind of been crucial within business and life of the people I work with, and for myself as well. So the first is that nature is an amazing sort of mentor when it comes to thinking about designing for life first. And what I mean by that is not kind of reacting when things have gone wrong and clawing back and trying to get to the situations that would help us, but that nature in its very principles collaborates in thinking about how do we create resilience, how do we create conditions that enable us to thrive and evolve and survive. And even though there is competition in nature, that actually it's considering what those conditions might be. So when I'm working with people, or even in my own business reflection, I'm thinking like, am I making these choices designed by life? And in all honesty, some of that's a lot of unlearning and unraveling things that kind of were just suppliers that are easy for us to get our hands on, and maybe then we take a step back and we think, well, does that contribute to life in the way that I'd want to contribute? And nature's really great at designing for resilience as well. So this is the pond at Little Seed Field, and I just always walk past it and look at this little ecosystem and how vibrant it is and how resilient it is. And it's only been there for a couple of years, and yet nature has kind of come in all resilient and diversified itself. The middle picture you'll see is one of my favourite trees down a lane near where I live, and it's an old fence from the railway, and this tree has just grown kind of round it and just been resilient enough to adapt to that particular barrier that it found. And then the one with the blue arrow just absolutely blew me away. It's an old oak tree, and in the centre of it is a whole new beech tree kind of growing up through the old, and like just showing the resilience and diversity of what nature can have. So we can invite ourselves to learn the lessons from nature, and I'll give you a prompt for that later. So the second one, and it's the one that we classically are brilliant at overlooking as humans, we're probably the only people, only species on Earth who are resistant to prioritizing and valuing self-regulation as a non-negotiable. And nature does this really proactively. So even if you just think to the basic needs of a plant or a tree, that is making sure it's got enough nutrients, light, water, it has rest, it has connectivity, it has a sense of community with those other species around it. And so one of the things, not only from being in nature, do we experience that we can self-regulate more effectively, but if we just look around nature and think about the choices that it's making in order to self-regulate, we can kind of bring some knowledge back from that for our life and our business as well. And this really comes through observing, so noticing, having enough space and headspace, or enough patterns in our business, like meeting or feedback opportunities, in order for us to both see, sense, and observe and receive the feedback that we're giving. So even if you just like zone into your body, you know, your body is an ecosystem for yourself, and you just start to notice like where you feel hot or cold, or where your tensions are in your body, or maybe what the feeling is that sits as you listen to me, and how often that's just kind of bumbling in the background as a tab open that we don't really kind of open ourselves up to, and what information and what like the way that we can enrich ourselves by being able to do that. So the third one is thinking like an ecosystem, and you'll hear this. This seems to be coming up as language that we're using so much more commonly now, and it really excites me that we are able to use this a little bit more. But seeing ourselves beyond our separate individualistic kind of perspectives, and knowing that everything that we do, the choices that we make in our business and our life are interconnected. And I find this really like a powerful thing when I'm sat in the woodlands and I'm seeing how the fact that a tree's fallen over and now, it's providing some good quality, like rotting material for new plants to emerge, or the fact that I've left the bird feeder out to feed the birds, but no, the deer actually really value that as well. And that realizing that even those small actions that we can take can be powerful. And I think when we have a small business and we're wanting to do and be good in the world, that sometimes it can feel a little bit overwhelming, a little bit hopeless. And then I just look to nature and look at all the intricacies of an ecosystem and how that's all interconnected. And it's kind of a way for us to reframe ourselves back to a point that if we're making the choices that we want and creatively responding to change, that actually we can contribute to something that is a whole ecosystem in a positive way. So this one, excuse the busy slide, you're not expected to see and notice everything on here, but this has been one of my favorite kind of learning points of learning with nature as well as being in it. And that's about seeing nature as a consultant. And these slides that you see are examples of a recent workshop that I did, where we actually took a group of leaders in business and we had a consultancy of nature's species, and we kind of looked at from there the different issues and their problems that they were typically facing as leaders. Maybe who would they hire as a consultant from the natural world? And so we can begin to look at what this biomimicry approach, so designing our business, learning from nature's strategies, learning from the fact that nature has this 3.8 billion years of experience. Imagine if we could come in as consultants or leaders and say, oh, I've got 3.8 billion years worth of experience. I think our hourly rates would probably go up a little bit, wouldn't they, as well? So being able to just actually look to nature for solutions. And we have been doing this in design for a long time. So you'll see there that Velcro was designed from the little burrs and understanding the hooks and how they kind of clip onto material. And then even the wind turbine design that you see was designed off humpback whales kind of fin patterns and noticing how the air and how the water could pass through that. So we've used it in kind of physical service design, and that's something that we can do for ourselves when we've got services or products, but we can also use it as a behavior design as well. How might a species effectively respond in a stressful situation, or how might it communicate? What models of communication could we adapt and bring into maybe our business patterns or the way that we work with customers, or even in our own kind of life and well-being needs as well. And this isn't metaphor, by the way. Like, I know often we go to metaphor. This is actually focusing on, what are the actual actions that a particular species takes, and how might we then adapt or translate that through to our own business needs or our own life approaches as well. So this is definitely a crucial one for us, and again, I think this is something that we are definitely becoming more attuned to. If any of you have read Wintering, the book about kind of leaning into a season of pause and rest, or perhaps I certainly on LinkedIn see more conversations about people kind of feeling a certain way at a particular time of year. But for me, one of the things that's been really useful, and this is an element of metaphor in it, is but to see our life or our businesses through seasons. So working with teams, for example, I've worked with a few conservation charities, and one of the things that they recognise is their projects were constantly in spring and summer. So they were bringing ideas, they were getting projects started, and then there was summer, they were blooming it, they were delivering it. but there was no autumn, there was no chance to evaluate, to harvest the learning, or even to winter and rest and grieve, maybe because the project has ended, or they're no longer can work with the clients or the customers that have really kind of brought that life to themselves and their business. So how can we consider the ways that we have seasonality within ourselves and our business? And as I'm a trauma-informed coach, so that also involves working with teams and them helping them to recognize, you know, how our personal stories may follow their own seasons. So one particular team that I worked with, they had about 5 bereavements that had happened over the winter period, and just kind of that reconnection with that grief cycle and what that meant in terms of the psychology and the impact of their kind of business and their culture, and how they could adapt to that. So how they might consider a more flexible working style within that, or how there might be an encouragement for people to kind of go out into nature and be with that kind of grief cycle that happens so naturally over the same season. So we can be really kind of intuitive to ourselves and adaptive in the way that we might see this seasonality, but also just on a real practical side, you know, like the energy, the light access that we have over winter, it shifts for us. You know, for some of us, we have our own monthly cycles, or we're changing in our kind of seasonal cycles throughout different stages of our lives. And how do we really meet ourselves where we're finding ourselves and adapt our own inner ecosystems to that, and help the people around us be able to do that as well. So some examples that I've included here also look at like those cycles. So on that big tree on the right hand side of my screen, that's actually what I call my dad's tree. So my dad passed away a fair few years ago now. This was a Christmas tree in our house that had roots, and he didn't tell my mum that he was going to plant it out. And now this picture doesn't even do it justice, but you can see the gate behind it across the road. You can imagine what those big gates are like. And it's this immense thing. And it really represents legacy for me. You know, what do we leave behind? And just reminds me that we can make really wonderful choices about how we enrich or enhance an ecosystem through the choices that we're making for ourselves and our business now. So, you know, moving on to legacy, you'll see the middle picture. This is a fallen tree, so dead wood in the forest, in the woods where I work. And it's one of the most vibrant little ecosystems in there. You know, this old dead wood that's just fallen, that maybe would have been removed, has actually created, there's holly that's sprouting from it, there's different alpines that's sprouting from it, squirrels come and go there. There's all sorts of different things that kind of are now alive within that piece of dead wood. And it really, again, it's symbolic of this. How do we make the choices for ourselves now in our life and our business that provide an enriching ecosystem beyond what we'll potentially ever know? You know, that tree doesn't know that it's like the boss location in the woods as well. And you know, I often will put in this provocative question of, have you thought about your business funeral? You know, are you designing a business that is purposeful, or a life that is purposeful, that at some point will no longer need to exist? And just like sitting with our discomfort of what does that actually mean for us if we're truly being purposeful and impactful. Then, you know, are we seeking to resolve an issue that either happens in the business lifetime, or contributes to the legacy of biodiversity and kind of planet health on a bigger scale? And then finally, you know, you can see on the left hand side, this is my little compost tin. And when people come into nature alongside me, just inviting them if there's anything that they want to compost or let go of and unlearn. And I think there's a lot of that cycle of just, you know, allowing ourselves to let go of things, of having mechanisms in life or business where we step back, we take the perspective and we think, how can we allow this to kind of be let go, to be shared? And knowing what compost does, of how it enriches the soil for a future kind of opportunity to be able to grow, and how do we cultivate that into our business or life. So let nature inspire you. That is my invite for you all. Have a go. So I'm just going to put like a suggestion. So next time you go out into the natural world, maybe observe, sense, be alive to the idea of how is nature doing resilience? How is it being resilient? You know, just look around you at the different examples maybe that you find, even if it's just in your garden, and then thinking about which strategies could be useful or adapted to you or your business or any context in life or work at all. So here are some of the, I don't know if I've talked really quickly or really slowly here. So here are some of the ways that kind of transitions for me into kind of the work that I do. So I launched Wild Workspaces, which is a co-working venture that's running as a retreat this year. And was like a pop-up event last year, which was really like co-working in nature, inviting people to come out into the natural world and kind of reap the benefits, but reconnect with nature and have no excuse for there to be at least one day of the month in nature that they could be working and inspired. So I do career and life coaching, facilitation and consultancy, well-being retreats, because the busy hectic world sometimes needs us to retreat back to nature, and team away days. And as you'll see from that picture, I also do just a lot of lying around and lolling in the woods for myself as well. So kind of like, yeah, I'll take the opportunity to do that. And what that looks like in kind of practice is lots of amazingly cool, wonderful people doing amazingly good things. And like, I overuse the word amazing so much because I'm literally surrounded, but also them reconnecting with the natural world as well. It's worth saying there are barely any pictures of men here, but actually about 60 to 75% of my client working kind of relationships are with men one-to-one as well, who really recognizing maybe they've had that like career like focus, and that's not being fulfillment, and they don't feel that they're contributing to kind of looking after the natural world and how to help people into, you know, doing good spaces really that benefit both their health and well-being, but give them the chance to kind of be a kin with the world that they love as well. So I get to do lots of cool things, and nature is obviously at the center of all that I do as well. So yeah, thank you. This is my reminder to you to just love life and choose life as the priority for it. And then there's my details. And if you've got any questions or anything, I will do my best to answer them or segue you politely into a distraction technique.